Good morning. Welcome to Modern Heroes, Rethinking Mental Illness. My name is Guy Fessenden. I am joined this morning, as always, with Stephanie Fessenden. And we're here to talk about mental health. Generally, what we do is we try and bring somebody on who is to give a firsthand experience about what it's like. This morning, we're talking with Randi Silverman. Randi is a mom, a lawyer, a filmmaker, and someone who has experienced mental illness as it impacted her son and, as a result, her family. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking with Randi about what that's been like. Good morning, Randi.
Good morning, Guy. Thank you so much for having me on, Stephanie. Thanks for having me. I really do appreciate it. Yes, I'm a mom. I have 3 beautiful children, and I was a lawyer before I decided to spend some time at home raising my kids. And, you know, who knew how hard parenting was going to be? I think we all agree that, you know, parenting doesn't come with a handbook, and it really should, because it's not easy under the best of circumstances. But, of course, well worth it. I have 3 children, 3 boys. And when my middle son was about 8 years old, he started to exhibit some very intense signs of anxiety, which ultimately led him to become very depressed.
How did the anxiety manifest itself? How could you tell he wasn't being an 8-year-old?
Well, I couldn't, actually. I did, the symptoms that I now know are symptoms of anxiety. People just kept telling me, well, you know, some kids are like that. So, for instance, big loud parties would be difficult for him, and he'd want to leave. He hated being on the school bus, so I would have to drive him. But then he would be worried that I wouldn't pick him up, and so I'd have to go through a whole routine with him to explain what would happen and where I would be and where I would stand. He didn't want to play outside unless I was right near him. He went from being this very outgoing, gregarious, funny little boy who started doing sleepovers when he was 4 years old and had tons and tons of friends and was a soccer goalie and did karate and took art classes, to suddenly wanting to quit everything, not wanting to participate, not wanting to be with his friends. The sleepovers stopped when he would call at midnight, come pick me up, I have a stomach ache, I have a headache. And he started spending more and more time in the nurse's office with stomach aches and headaches. And I would go to the teachers, and I even went, I remember, in first grade to the school psychologist, and I said, is this normal? I don't know. I never heard anybody where I live talk about their children behaving this way.
So you went to a school psychologist. Yes. Without your child?
Oh, yes. She observed him in class. Mm-hmm. And because I called and said, I really want to talk about my son. Can you, I'm just a little concerned. And we had a meeting, and she said to me, it sounds like mom maybe has an issue, but your son is fine when he's here. I don't see any problem. And so then I thought, okay, it's me. There's something I'm doing. And my husband thought I wasn't strict enough. And people around me would look at me like, why can't you control your kid? You baby him too much. And so I believed them. How are you supposed to know these things? So I didn't know it was anxiety. I know now that it was anxiety. Mm-hmm. But when he was 9 and told me he wanted to die and he hated his life and didn't want to live anymore, then I knew there was something terribly, terribly wrong. Because, what 9-year-old wants to die? And he went from being this happy kid to, despondent, started to refuse to go to school, hated his school, hated his teachers. It was heartbreaking, absolutely heartbreaking.
So as a parent, you kind of come to a crossroad.
Right.
Where you say, I'm concerned about my social status in the community, or I'm concerned about my kid. And most people want to go and say, oh, it's nothing and he'll outgrow it and I'm not going to jeopardize my social status
by
having the kid. Did you?
That's really interesting. I think what I did is I said, I have to figure out what's going on with my kid. I had him tested. I took him to psychologists for help. At the same time, I wasn't exactly out there telling people. I would sort of mention a little something, if I was having coffee with other moms, and I just knew they had no idea what I was talking about. That their advice would be, make a sticker chart. Okay, I already tried the sticker chart thing. What about if you take away all of his video games? Okay, I tried that already. Mm-hmm. Didn't work. So, no one seemed to get it. And it seemed to me that I was the only one. So, as he became more and more sick, and it became difficult for him to go out in the social world without, either having a tantrum, so to speak, or just needing to leave, I isolated. So it's not that I chose the social status. It's as much as I couldn't bear to be around all of these other families who seemed so perfect. And why wasn't my family like that? Remember, I'm a young mother at this point. I'm not now, but I was then.
Oh.
And I didn't know, and you don't know what you don't know. No one had ever talked about the fact that a child, in front of me, I like you said, I was a lawyer. I'm well educated. I grew up in a nice home. Nobody ever talked about stuff like this. I didn't know a child could have a mental illness. I thought, that was only kids who were abused or neglected. And my family seemed like every other family. So I don't know if that answers your question.
And then you started into peeling away the layers.
Right.
And understanding what was really going on. And unfortunately, in most cases, you have to kind of fall a little bit until you hit a bottom.
That's right.
And then hopefully come back from it. What was the bottom?
Well, like you said, it was a slippery slope. I think it took several years going through a variety of doctors and experts. I kept thinking I was going to meet a doctor and he was going to hand me a pill and it was all going to get fixed. And
well, they hand you pills.
They do. They handed me lots of pills. At one point, my son was probably on 25 different medications. Right. He gained 50 pounds. He was either lethargic and despondent or wildly violent. The medication just, in some ways, the medication saved him. And in other ways, it was a very difficult path trying to find the right medication. But in any event, we went through, I think he was in 5 different schools in a period of 2 years.
Public schools?
Well, I started out sending him to a private school thinking, that will help. If I put him in a smaller environment, that will help. And that really actually did him in because academically it was just too stressful for him. And again, at this point, I didn't realize really what the underlying nature of his problems were. And so then he had a very difficult time with that and sort of had his first kind of breakdown, I would say, where he just couldn't leave the house. He couldn't do anything. He couldn't go back to public school. He couldn't go to private school. So the school district was great. They sent tutors, but of course he would hide in the closet and not talk to the tutors. So, and then we would find a therapeutic support program for him, and he would last there for a small period of time and until he couldn't take it anymore, and then he'd end up back at home being homeschooled. Those were the years I really isolated because I couldn't leave the house because he wouldn't leave the house. And
so what turned it around?
Ultimately one day, and he was so painfully sick, he just had such a meltdown. And I remember I had to restrain him because he was breaking furniture and screaming obscenities and threatening to hurt everyone. And anyway, I realized that I couldn't help him at home anymore, and I needed to send him to a residential program. And that was really the lowest point. That was really difficult.
And from there, you were able to rebuild.
Yes. We were, and he's doing great now. And I have, he's great. Things are good right now.
All right. Well, we're going to take a couple of minute break, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about what Randi did, how Eli's doing, and the remarkable journey of a parent who loves. We'll be right back. Hi, and welcome back to Modern Heroes, Rethinking Mental Illness. This is Guy Fessenden, joined by Stephanie Fessenden and our guest today, Randi Silverman. In our first segment, Randi, we were talking about your son Eli and some of the challenges that he's had starting at an early age of 8 years old with anxiety, depression, and kind of the journey where he ultimately went into a residential program and has been able to find stability. You call it remission.
Yes.
Because this is something that doesn't necessarily go away forever, but it can go away in the moment. Right. And it's remarkably difficult, and I identify as a parent who has a child with a mental illness. You talk about how hard, you said in the beginning about how hard it is to be a parent, and it comes with no manual. But when you get thrown into the world of mental illness, that kind of makes the parent with no manual thing look like a walk in the park.
That's true.
And through it all, you negotiated that. You stuck with your son. You put your son over everything else.
Right.
And you did what you needed to do to help him get to a better place. And then you made a movie.
Yeah. I guess that is kind of how it happened. Well, first of all, let me just say that Eli has worked very, very hard to get to the place where he is. I think of myself as his coach, but he's the one who's worked hard. He went to the necessary levels of treatment that he needed to go to make himself a more stable and healthy person. And so he's a real survivor and a real hero, if you ask me. But yeah, so then what happened is I decided as a parent, well, that's it. I have to start speaking out. I have to talk about this.
Why? What did you experience that caused you to think that you need to speak out?
I started talking to people and, my heart was so heavy that I couldn't hide it anymore. I said that this is my life, and anyone who doesn't want to be my friend because I have a son who's mentally ill doesn't need to be my friend. So anyway, I decided I'm going to get loud. I'm going to start talking about it. And long story short, I was asked to participate in the making of a short film called Illness. And the short film is about a teenage boy who suffers from a mental illness. And they brought me along as a consultant to kind of advise them to make sure they kept it as real as possible. And what amazed me was how much the film spoke to me and how much it really portrayed what life was really like for us. Unfortunately, you can't possibly tell a story like that in 13 minutes. I mean, it's very complicated and very difficult. So now the film has been very successful. It's been in over 15 film festivals, and it's won 5 different awards, 2 for Best Short.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's been just an amazing experience. And my children actually were involved in the film, so that's really kind of interesting. And now we are in the process of developing a feature film because, as I said, you can't tell this story in 15 minutes. So, now I'm really, all of a sudden I'm a filmmaker. Who knew?
So real quick, because we're wrapping up, how do people get in touch with you for more information or to see the film?
Well, again, my name is Randi Silverman, and I am on Facebook. Illness has a Facebook page. If you go to Facebook and Illness, the movie, 2013. Illness also has a YouTube channel where you can see screeners. And from there, you can get information about the development of the feature film.